had a friend who asked me, you know, where do you live or whatever. This was like around the beginning of school. And I was like, I told her my address. And she was like, oh, well, are there like gangbangers on every street? And like, are there like crack babies in the playground? Like, do people get shot every day? Like, are there like constant like sirens and stuff? Do the police like shoot people all the time? And I just looked at her and I was kind of confused because I didn't understand like what made her ask me that at the time. Because, you know, when you first get to school, it's like, you know, kind of like fishing for whatever. So it caught me off guard, and I actually I almost didn't want to answer her question because her question was so assuming, and it was so like she had already had in her mind where I lived and what it was like without even asking me. So it's just like it made me upset, and I tried to like find the right words to like tell her like, no, like that's not what it is. We don't have, you know, some drug dealers on every street. Like there aren't. I don't think she really understood what it was like to live in a predominantly black neighborhood for her to like say that out of her mouth. I think she based her comment off of stereotypes because that's all she heard of, and she's never really been in that environment to make a better judgment.
As a country, when we think of the history of racial inequality in our country, we often see it as a problem that was isolated, a Southern problem. After all, Jim Crow, lynchings, and other forms of racial discrimination seem to have never affected the North the way it affected the South. But the ongoing segregation in Chicago indicates otherwise. Lesser known than Jim Crow, yet still hugely significant, Chicago's segregation has largely flown under the radar even when the racial distribution of the city hasn't changed much since the 1960s. Today, the city's white population is concentrated on the north side, while the city's black population is largely concentrated on the south side. On this map of Chicago, the white population is shown with purple dots, while the black population is shown with green dots. So the next logical question would be to ask, why is Chicago like this? Was this just a trend created out of residents' preference, or was there malicious intent to segregate?
I think certainly we've gotten to where we're at in terms of our degree of segregation through a long history, and a huge chunk of it is, you know, not only local but federal racist policies that through a bunch of different means created and then reinforced a very segregated city. We've had, you know, fire bombings and racially restrictive covenants and city policies that have kept especially black people out of white neighborhoods.
History tells us that Chicago's current segregation was prompted by the 50,000 black Southerners that moved to Chicago between 1916 and 1920 due to the growing industrial opportunities in the North. In response to this African American population boom, the Chicago Real Estate Board attached legally binding covenants to land, prohibiting African Americans from buying, selling, or using property in white neighborhoods. The black migrants were pushed into overcrowded and overpriced areas on the south side, called the Black Belt. The building racial tensions exploded with a race riot in the summer of 1919, said to be triggered by the drowning of a black teenager, Eugene Williams, who, while swimming with friends, drifted past the line of segregation between sections of the lakefront. Whites spotted the black swimmers on the segregated beach and began throwing rocks. The following 5 days of fighting left 38 people dead, over 500 wounded, and 1,000 homeless. White neighborhoods wanted to stay white, so when other tactics failed, they turned to terrorism. In 1951, thousands of white people in Cicero, west of downtown Chicago, attacked an apartment in which a single black family lived, throwing bricks and firebombs, in turn setting the apartment on fire. And this attack wasn't isolated. Similar acts occurred all over the city, many still left largely unreported by many of Chicago's daily newspapers, and still unknown today. Although the Supreme Court finally declared racial covenants unenforceable in 1948, other segregationist policies remained. The Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, used maps that rated neighborhoods, A-rated areas on the maps were green and outlined in-demand neighborhoods that were defined not to have any foreigners or black residents. Neighborhoods in which black people lived were colored in red and rated D. These areas were considered ineligible for FHA mortgage backing. The presence of black people was considered detrimental for a neighborhood. This practice was called redlining. Redlined areas couldn't access the capital needed for investment and redevelopment. Therefore, poor and minority neighborhoods in cities like Chicago were not preferred for residential investment compared to the suburbs, excluding many inner cities from the prosperity of post-World War America.
We are a prospering people, wherever we live or earn our livelihood. We have bounties beyond those known to the people of any other day.
It was mostly a white area, and when they said that the niggers was coming, they didn't say black, they said the niggers was coming. And they just start moving away.
Another form of housing discrimination was also prominent: contract selling.
The FHA, which was government policy and bank policy, made it possible for these real estate speculators to come along. And they were, the ones who went on the west side, they'd go block by block and to start panicking white folks who lived in the area. They'd send a black lady with a baby buggy down the street. They'd say that the blacks are coming and so on and so forth, and start scaring people out. And they'd buy for basically market value or a little bit below market value. I think of most of the houses in Lawndale, for example, were $15,000, and speculators paid $13,000, $14,000, $15,000. And then they turn around 2 days later and sell to a black family for $25,000.
They had been sold a contract. If you missed the payment in 3 months, they could take the property back. No lawyer, no nothing could help you. That was it.
In response to these discriminatory housing practices, the Contract Buyers League was formed in North Lawndale, a coalition to fight blockbusting and contract selling.
It cost them $20,000 per family more to own a home than if they were white. And we called that $20,000 a race tax, which it clearly was.
We know homes are how people in America build wealth largely. And if you cut black people out of that opportunity, a lot is explained about what the African American community looks like today.
How much was stolen from the African American community in Chicago from contract selling alone in the second Great Migration, 1940 to 1970. And after doing the research, I came to the conclusion that it was at least $500 million stolen over 30 years from the African American community.
In Chicago, poverty is concentrated in South and West Side neighborhoods that are more than 90% black.
If you were to go to a predominantly white neighborhood, and I don't mean to keep throwing up the word white, but there are serious differences between them. And, predominantly white neighborhood, they're good from schools, right? You have nice grocery stores with organic fruit, okay? Fruit isn't rotting on the stand, and obviously I feel like if it's in a better neighborhood, then overall, like, the standards are higher for the stores, for the schools, and for housing. The requirements are higher, and what it takes and what it means to fund a grocery store is different. And if you were to go in a neighborhood that's predominantly of color, you're gonna find, I've been to a grocery store in a predominantly black neighborhood that had like cereal that was like expired, and like the fruit was like moldy, and like the floor were disgusting. I'm just like, how does this grocery store like not get closed down? Like, why is it still standing? You know what I mean? Like, what if this grocery store was placed downtown, how fast would it be shut down? Let's be honest. It wouldn't last very long. So why is it that that's even a thing? Why does that exist? You know? And it angers me because I feel like nothing's being done about it. Like you know about it, but it's like, it's not enough awareness, you know? So.
Segregation still exists everywhere in the United States. It's become a secret underground conversation. It's not talked about as blatantly and as vigorously as it was in the 1960s in the Civil Rights Movement. So we are just as well a victim of the way the nation talks about segregation and race. So that's why it's not discussed as much. And you need people in power and people in positions of influence to be able to stick their neck out long enough and loud enough to discuss that.
The continuing racial segregation across our country is a forgotten issue today, even though it's crucial to understanding modern social movements and community dynamics across our nation. As Nathaniel Branden once said, the first step towards change is awareness. We can't make change in our impoverished communities without first understanding how they came to be.